Welcome to the Select Star Podcast, your resource for innovative technology, developer topics, and more. Here's your host, Margot McCabe from the HarperDB team.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Select Star Podcast. Hope your day is going well, and thanks for tuning in. Today, we have another special guest, as we always do. We have Annie, also known on social media as Annie Bombani. She's a designer and front-end engineer, and we're super excited to have you today. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, no worries. I'm really excited to be here, Margot.
Yeah, and where are you joining from, or where are you based out of? Because I saw you have numerous different flags on your social media.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm originally from Australia, but I'm currently in Toronto.
Okay, very cool. So not too far from us over here in Colorado, even though it's kind of on the other side.
Yeah, same continent.
Yep, that's true. And what part of Australia are you from?
I'm from Perth, which is basically the most isolated part of Australia. I've been trying to get back during COVID, but there's been a really hard border there, so it's been a little bit tough.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that. That's hard. I know I've talked to a lot of people in the same position that are trying to go back and forth. And I spent some time in Australia a long time ago on the other side over near Sydney, and my husband and I were trying to go back a couple years ago, and obviously that hasn't worked out, and I've been dying to show it to him. So
Yeah.
hopefully it'll start to relax at some point over the next few years here.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I work remote, so one of the things that I'd love to do when I get back is actually just be in Australia for, a month or two and just work from there.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a benefit.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's definitely one of the positives that have come from all of these people working from home now, is you can kind of work from anywhere. I know in Colorado, we have tons of people moving up to the mountain towns, people flooding there because they're like, if I don't have to commute into a city, I might as well work from the mountainside. So
what a dream.
I know, one day. But awesome. Well, yeah, other than where you are based out of right now, we'd love to just hear a little bit about who you are, what you've been working on, what you do now, just anything you want to share.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually graduated from a front-end focused bootcamp in summer of 2019. And before that, I was a designer in Australia and in England for several years. And then I decided to become an English teacher in Japan.
Oh,
Not
cool.
because I had a very good career plan. In fact, I didn't have a career plan. I just kind of wanted to live in Japan and experience the culture there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like doing that for a number of years, when I moved to Canada, or to Toronto specifically after that, I really struggled to find work. I thought I could, jump back into the design scene really easily, but unfortunately that was definitely not the case. So I started looking into ways of skilling up, and that was when boot camps kind of came back into the picture, because I didn't really want to do like another 3-year degree. I have a degree in multimedia design from Australia.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, what's out there? What can I do? Because it's really hard to get a job. And I was just kind of working a few different like dead end jobs and stuff just to make ends meet. And that's kind of when I found out about boot camps as a very viable way to get into to skilling up. And I was trying to decide between UX design or front end. But there was a bootcamp called Hacker U in Toronto at the time, and they had really, really good reviews. And they were also very, what's the word? Like they had a lot of women in there, so it felt very like accommodating. So that's kind of who I ended up choosing. I didn't like front end development or coding before, but once I gave it a go, as I got better, I started falling in love with it. So.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And how long did you say that boot camp was for?
So the boot camp was only 9 weeks. So it was really short. I did a part-time course before with the same school, just to, dip my feet in and see if this was actually something I could do. Because literally, although I studied web design in Australia, and I did actually work in web design a lot, and so I had to code a few things, I really didn't want to be a developer. So that was just like my way of dipping my toes in and seeing if it was a good fit. And once I started getting good at it, I was like, okay, maybe I will try for the bootcamp and see where this goes. And then I was very surprised when I got accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good way to do it. As you said, it's better to test it out and then, maybe do a boot camp where you can learn more in a short period of time than committing to another 3 years or 4 years of your life doing another long study. I know everyone learns at different paces, and some people maybe are just doing one class at a time in the evenings or something, but I personally would probably do it the same way and just try to get as much done in a short period of time as possible. And then of course you just continue learning as you go. So I think that makes sense. And I know you said you had a hard time finding a job in design before doing the boot camp. Did you find that a lot of times employers were requiring either more experience or some sort of formal training, or did you just kind of want to get a leg up so that you could find something quicker, or how did that search go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the reason I was having a lot of trouble finding work in design was because I didn't have a strong network in Toronto.
Okay.
That I really had no network. Because I did work in design in Australia and in England, but those experiences were from years ago. And so when I kind of, so if that makes sense. So I think that was the main thing. And like through the bootcamp and just the last few years, like working as a developer, I really, really came to kind of understand the importance of, your network and your community and that. And I didn't have that when I came to Toronto.
Okay. That's a good point, and probably good for people to hear, is that, when it comes down to it, sometimes who is more important than what formal training you have or what your title is. I know, people love to battle about, do you have to have a degree to get a job? Do you have to have X to get into tech? But a lot of times if you know the right people and can get a warm intro, that's probably most important. So
yeah, that was a really good learning for me the last few years. I didn't really place a whole lot of importance on that before. But after my experiences, I was like, wow, this is huge. And I've heard of, a lot of like developers who are further on in their careers going through the interview process. And some of them like barely have to interview just because someone's had such a strong recommendation of them. So yeah, it's definitely a way to get work as you go further down your career track.
Yeah, some people I think are afraid of the word networking, but it means so many different things, and it's definitely important no matter what area you're in.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like that word just automatically makes a lot of people just cringe, and I didn't like it either. So I'm always kind of thinking of it as, okay, I'm just gonna meet people that I can form a connection with somehow.
Right.
Because yeah, it just sounds very, I don't know, like cold, and you're doing it for like a very specific purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like you're going up to people just shaking hands, like, can you help me get a job? Can you help me
exactly.
Not like that. Hopefully, at least. Very cool. Well, so what company are you at now, and what kind of product do they have?
Yeah, so I work at a startup called Pastel. This is actually my second job. The first job was at a WordPress VIP agency, and that was that was very much a front end job. I was mostly just doing HTML and CSS. But at this startup right now, I am working in Next.js and in TypeScript, React, and Redux and stuff. And I was actually their first employee. So
congrats. That's pretty cool.
yeah, thank you. It was like 3 founders, and I was hired in October of 29. Wait, it's 2022 right now. Okay. Yeah. I was hired in October of 2020. Okay. And as a UX and UI developer, but I'm currently the front end lead here.
Okay, that's awesome. And so you were first employee. How many are there now?
There's still only 5 of us. So we hired another person after me, and we're hoping to hire a backend dev in the next few months, hopefully.
Okay, very cool. Well, yeah, I can definitely relate a little bit to that. I've been, in the startup. I've been with HarperDB for several years now, and before that, I was at even a smaller startup. And I love this tech startup world too. So I can definitely relate a little bit there. And so, what exactly is the product at Pastel?
Yeah, so Pastel is a online proofing software, and what that is it's an application to help you, share, review, and approve your files. So you build websites, right?
Yeah. Well, a little bit, pretty
Okay.
dipping my toes in.
Okay. So say you like built a website and you wanted to get feedback from your client or your teammates, like what's your process for doing that?
We mainly just use WordPress. And so we sometimes use templates. We sometimes build our own, but we've been using WordPress for a while now.
Mm-hmm. And then if you were to get clients to give you feedback on that site, how would that look like? What would that look like?
You mean if we were going to have our current customers like take a look at our website for feedback?
Yeah, and like approve it or say like, oh, can you change this or put a different picture?
Oh, so we don't build websites for other people. I thought you meant like, do we work? I just was talking about building like our own website for HarperDB,
Oh,
but we
right.
don't do it for other people.
Okay.
So I was like, yeah, we have had people give us some feedback on our website before, but we're not really in that space. What HarperDB is, more on the back end side of database data management. We
Fair
do
enough.
work with people in that world a lot, and a lot of times people are using different front end design tools with like HarperDB as a backend. So we are having those conversations a lot, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I was like, yeah, I do help build our website sometimes using WordPress, but not too
Right.
much.
That makes sense. Well, I guess like just to go back to that, it's like well for the UI and copy changes, a lot of what we found was, and this was true as a designer for me as well, for just like design, if I was to get feedback from my clients, I would have to, they would basically, like email me back and forth, or you would send like screenshots and stuff. And especially for websites, maybe a client would be like, oh, there's a bug here, and you're looking at the website and there's no bug, and then it turns out the bug was on a different screen size or something.
Right.
So yeah, so it's like a lot of back and forth between like teammates and clients and whatnot. So what Pastel is for is to kind of streamline that whole process. So specifically for websites, you can kind of imagine it as a app where you can put post-it notes on your websites, and then you can have threads of conversations, and then all the metadata like your browser size and the screen size are captured, and there's like screenshot where the comment was left.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, so it's basically like a proxy technology, and it sits on
Okay.
top of the websites, and you can interact with it to get all the
Okay.
feedback and everything.
That's really cool. Yeah. So you're just streamlining the whole process so that it's, if I'm understanding correctly, almost similar to working off of like a shared Google Doc or something, so that people can be leaving notes for each other, doing feedback instead of having to do it via email or phone. You can kind of like work together off of the actual website.
Yes, that's right. And
Okay.
it's not like we are actually touching your website, because it's a kind of like a copy of the website, and there's like, you don't have to install a script or anything, or a browser extension either, which is a lot better for security as well.
Okay. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting. I can see, why you'd want to get in with a company like that at such an early stage. And, what was it like? What's it like being at such an early stage startup? Was it kind of scary at first, accepting that role as the first official employee? Was it really exciting? A little bit of both? Like, what's your
Mm-hmm.
experience been with that so far?
Well, it's been like really exciting. I wasn't really scared because, to be honest, I was, when I first by the time the CTO contacted me, and they had found me through Twitter, because I was sharing some of the work I was doing there, just like my side projects. But when they first contacted me, I was at a stage of my career where I was just feeling really stagnant technically at my skills. So I did mention that my first job was the front end job. And it was really interesting because I thought that I would be really happy with a CSS heavy role, because I was so comfortable with CSS, like after, the training and stuff, and with design and everything. But in reality, after 6 months of that, I actually got really bored. Like, I felt like I had learned all the things that I needed to learn, that you can learn on a job, like, working with Jira or sprints, or project estimations and that kind of stuff. And so after 6 months, I was just feeling really scared that my logic skills and my JavaScript and React skills, which I was not touching at all, was just like I was losing those skills so they reached out about a year and a quarter into my first dev job around that time. And I was just at a stage where I was just like really wanting to like jump more into the things that would challenge me a bit more, which is basically JavaScript. So it really came at the right time. And financially, something that really mitigated the risk of basically joining a startup was that they were bootstrapped. So they were profitable before they hired me. And so I asked a lot of questions during the interview, and they were very transparent with the numbers as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's good for you for knowing the right questions and things to ask up front. And I think timing really is so important when it comes to opportunities like this. So that's really cool. And I as I said, I love startup world as well. It's so great being able to wear a lot of different hats and be involved in so many different conversations. And it's just a great way to really expand your skills. As you said, like you were wanting to challenge yourself more, and then that opportunity was there. And when you're at a startup, there's no one has time to micromanage or check in constantly with what you're doing. It's kind of like you just have that trust and independence to do what you're supposed to do. And if you try new things and it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. And
definitely,
it's kind of a cool place to be. And I love that you did it partially to help expand your skills and take on more of a challenge instead of just kind of staying with what was comfortable.
It was interesting because I had a conversation with a friend shortly after I started, and we were just kind of talking about the different types of environment that, we like working in. And with a startup, there's definitely, chaos there, right? Like you kind of have to be comfortable not having everything in place, especially a lot of processes. In terms of processes, like we're still building them out as we're growing like slowly. But she was saying that she likes to know when, her start time and when she finishes. Whereas I like having the flexibility of, if I need to pop out for to do like an errand or something, I know that I can make up that time later on or something. Right. So yeah, it's like different environments for different people.
Yeah, exactly. I think having that flexibility is really important, especially now with people working from home. I think like at least maybe half of our company has people have kids. I recently just had a baby. And so that's definitely something that you see a lot more maybe in the startup world of like, hey, I got to go grab the kids from school. Maybe if you're out for 2 hours in the afternoon, you just get back on in the evening and finish up whatever you needed to. And that's okay. It's like, as long as you do what needs to get done, it's no one's going to be mad about it. So I really appreciate that part of it too. On the other side, have there been any big challenges with it? Any like cons to being on a smaller team? Or if people listening are considering getting into a similar position or considering moving over to a smaller company, like any tips you have for success and kind of overcoming some of those challenges?
Yeah, one of the things that I was actually concerned about was mentorship at the beginning, because I've heard that, I don't know if this is the case, and maybe you have a few more ideas about this, but I heard that it's mostly at bigger companies that you get more formal, mentorship and training. So yeah, that was something that I was concerned about. And in the interview with my CTO, I mentioned that. And it turned out that like we have a really great relationship where we do pairing every, at least once a week, if not twice or more. So I do have that mentoring. The other thing that I guess is a bit of a negative is because at Pastel, me and my CTO are the only two developers. So yeah, so something that kind of came up was if I'm not able to like have my decisions challenged all the time, or have people to talk with, like to go through those decisions that I make. And that was something that was very different, because it's like everything is kind of up to me. So yeah, so that was a little bit different, and something that I've kind of done, I guess, to help with that is to get involved with a lot of communities, like online or with other people, so that if I have questions, I can reach out to other people, not just my CTO, because he's great and we talk about, like code architecture and everything. But at the same time, it's the relationship between, an employer and employee is always going to be a little bit different.
Right. Yeah. It's always good to get that outside perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. So if someone was in that case where they're working at a very small startup and they're feeling like, oh, I want to hear a different opinion or something, I would definitely encourage them to get involved with, like even on Twitter, if I have questions, I'm quite comfortable asking the community, and I'll get a lot of different opinions that way that I can kind of shift through and, think about them and make my own decisions.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I don't know if that was like your experience working at like the startups with just having people to like bounce ideas back and forth a lot more. But yeah, literally it's just me and my CTO in engineering.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. I was going to say, there's probably like a Slack, multiple Slacks and Discords and things where you can drop ideas across people. I've definitely seen people do like polls on Twitter about which of these designs do you like better, or just different things of like trying to get an outside perspective. And I know I being in that position before, I know sometimes it's like you just want the validation of the one you're leaning towards.
Yeah.
And other times you're like, no, I really don't know which way to go and I just need some help. And so I think that's a really good point, is just make sure you build a community on the outside and don't be afraid to ask for opinions and advice, so that you're not, so you can get a different perspective. And I totally get that. We don't have quite as small of a team as you guys. And so I am fortunate to be able to ask, like, I can pop something by our product team or by our dev team, or chat with, the folks on the sales marketing side. And we're pretty collaborative. And a lot of times we'll kind of have like one person from each of those areas in conversation so that we can get different perspectives. But at the same time, I think most people on our team do have external mentors. I think our CTO has a friend or a mentor or whatever you'd like to call it that he meets with either once a week or every other week. I think it's like every single Wednesday, to just kind of chat about like what he's working on from a technical perspective, what, the vision for the product, the ways he's going to get there, and just kind of gets, an outside opinion on like the best way to get from point A to B and the best technologies to be looking at and things like that. And so I think that's always a way to advance your career and learn about new things and kind of bring ideas to your team. So that it's not just the same, as you said, it's not just the same two people having the same conversations over and over.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very fortunate that my CTO is very like flexible in his thinking and open to new ideas. So
yeah,
it really throws me a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely important in the tech world, I think, to stay on your toes and be kind of flexible and ready to try different things. I know I've heard our team talk about with building our product from the ground up that it's just a game of trial and error. And you're constantly evolving and constantly fixing things and swapping out technologies, and you find something that's faster and more performant, and doesn't mean what you did was wrong or bad, but it's just kind of constantly evolving.
Yeah, something that I've really kind of noticed working at Pastel is that everything is just a series of experiments that we're trying and continuously iterating on. So it's not just like the tech that we're like experimenting with, it's the processes for our team and like HR and like all sorts of things, like how we position our product. And it's been really interesting because we're such a small team that everything is very transparent and open. So we all have some input on, what's happening. But at the same time, like, because we're so small, like we all just handle not like super specific roles, but we do have those roles where we have to autonomously manage them, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like you kind of have to manage and balance the difference between we're all working together and wearing a lot of hats, but we still kind of need to stay in our own lane and focus on, what we're here to do.
Yeah, exactly. Have you heard of the bystander effect actually in psychology?
I have. I can't remember it very well, but I remember hearing a story about like if someone sees that someone fell over and got hurt, they're not going to call if it's out in public because they just assume that other people are going to.
Yes. So I had a very interesting discussion with my CTO in my one-on-one a couple of weeks back about this. And so it's like the bystander effect, you can also see that happening in companies and in management as well. So if you don't have clear responsibility of like, if a product or a item it's not clear who holds the responsibility for that, then no one owns it. And you end up with conversations like, oh, I thought so-and-so was going to take care of it and stuff. And we've seen that a little bit, like, the first few months or so when I joined and when when our support person joined as well. So it's like that was very interesting, and kind of like we knew that we had to have like clearer delineation of like responsibility, so we know who's taking care of it.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess like part of it is also like over communicating as well, especially for remote teams. You're not seeing each other face to face. So if you're able to communicate and share what you're working on and have like a bias for action, those were definitely things that I've learned, like, you know, being at a startup for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I think if you don't have some sort of system where people can see, you know, people internally can see like that you know, like a Jira, for example, if people can see that you move that task along and it's assigned to you and you're working on it, that's great. But for other things, if there's no place publicly where people can see that you're handling it, then yeah, it might be like 2 weeks later and then everyone's like, wait, no one no one went and looked at that, or no one addressed that or responded to that person. And so I think that's yeah, we're constantly like checking in with each other about things like that and trying to make sure to like let people know, hey, I've got this. Don't worry about it. That's a really good point. So I think those are really good tips, but I love, you know, the reasons that you kind of moved into the tech startup world. I'm a big fan, and I've never been at a huge company. I was definitely early when I very first started my career. I was at a bigger company, but I've never been at like a huge multinational type of corporation. So I can't really speak as much to the comparisons there, but I do love the space. So I feel you on that.
Yeah, it's really nice to have the autonomy. Like working at an agency, because I get bored quite easily. I thought that I would really enjoy working on multiple projects, but something that I actually found was that once you finish a project, that project gets passed on to, you know, someone else or the next stage, and you don't actually see it anymore. So it's actually really nice working at a SaaS product company where like you're still doing different things in terms of the features you're building or like the things that you're improving and refactoring in the code base. But at the same time, you're still working on the one product and you get to see it grow and mature and change over time. And that just feels really nice. I've been really enjoying that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's those are really good points you make, and definitely just make me appreciative of where I'm at as well. So great minds think alike, I guess. But so what then are you kind of focusing on at the moment and like the rest of this year, both personally and, you know, at the company you're at? Like, do you have side projects simultaneously? Are you mainly just focusing on work at the moment? Like, what are your main goals right now?
So we kind of work on 2-month cycles where we have a goal and then we work towards it, and then we reiterate and see like our next goals after that. But I do know for the next like little while, there's like 3 things that I'm working on just for the code base or for work. And the first thing I'm doing, and I'm in the middle of it right now, is to introduce a design library or a UI component library so that we can build faster and reduce UI inconsistencies, sorry. So at the moment, we use custom components, and we kind of we use SaaS to like write all our CSS. And we found that because of that, it's taking a while to build things. So I'm looking into things like Tailwind UI or like other solutions to see how we can like basically take advantage of a pre-existing component library, bring that in, and so that we can build and ship faster. So that's the first thing I'm working on. The next thing that we're going to do is implement some integration testing to ship our features. We don't currently have testing. I know it's like almost like so taboo to say that. But it's like, because, you know, in the startup world, it was just like my CTO building out everything, and the priority was to get like features and stuff out more than it was to just like test everything and make sure that nothing broke. But we're kind of, but we're kind of at a point now where I'm like, I think we should really start, you know, adding some testing, at least like some integration testing and stuff. So after the design library, I'll be doing some integration testing stuff. And then the third thing on my plate after that is we're currently using old school Redux to manage our state in the app. And so something that I'd like to look into is Redux Toolkit. And this will help to just simplify those Redux tasks that we do and reduce some of that boilerplate that we currently have to write.
Okay. Sounds like you definitely have your work cut out for you. You'll be pretty busy then.
Yeah, there's so many things to work on. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I just look back to my first job, and within 6 months, building just like site after site, and I was like, oh, this is all there is. But it's been like a year and a quarter now, and I'm like, oh wow, there's just like so much things I want to do and improve on. It's
Right.
a really good feeling.
Yeah. So do you do any side projects then? Are you still kind of like doing design on the side just for fun or for any like contract work, or are you just too busy at the moment?
I haven't touched like actual design work for a while, but I definitely still do projects on the side, mostly for me. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so one of the things that, because I have that design and illustration background, I really kind of I really enjoy creative coding. So in the past, I've done a lot of CSS art, and and that's actually been really helpful, just bettering my CSS skills, because you learn how to use gradients in different ways. So my cat just walked past the
Oh, no worries.
yeah. So yeah, you learn how to use like gradients in different ways, and SVGs is something that I'm also very personally interested in as well. So there's definitely some stuff that I like to, learn more in the SVG world. There's also, in terms of just like content creation and stuff, I really like explaining things in a like using analogies. So something I did recently was explain the CSS box model with a illustrated analogy of basically a person. The Your body is the content, your padding is the coat, the border is the like your silhouette with the coat on, and then your margin is your personal space. um
That's cool.
yeah, so I kind of like thinking about those kind of things, and how like other kind of like technical concepts with like CSS or JavaScript or HTML and SVGs that I can illustrate that way. It's just kind of helps me to think about things in a different way and see if I can help people to understand those things a bit better. Because I know, like, for me, I struggled a lot learning JavaScript, especially, and anything that can help make someone else's journey a bit easier, I'm keen to try and like help that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really cool. That's one of my favorite things about being in the tech community is just seeing how many resources are out there and how eager people are to share their knowledge in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like through analogy or doodling or making videos or whatever it may be, there's like so many different mediums to learn now. And it's just really cool seeing people that are so passionate about it that they're going to like take their extra time out of their day to create something to help the community instead of just, the second they log out of work, like going and, closing their computer, putting everything on the side. They're like, well, I'm going to take some of my time to help people by creating this content that I've learned a lot about. And so
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. And I get to meet really cool people in that space constantly, just kind of being in like the content creation space and connecting with people like you. And it's just kind of this, when everyone's working remote right now, it's kind of this way of, I think, making people feel a little more unified.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think as well, doing those kind of things, when you share your learnings and whether you blog about it or draw about it, that helps you as well to solidify those concepts as you're learning. So, you're helping others, but you are helping yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. And you're almost kind of building up your own mini like portfolio or online repertoire for if you ever are looking for a job or something in the future. Those are,
Definitely.
that shouldn't be like your sole motive, but it's definitely a bonus of like, hey, this company's looking and they saw how knowledgeable you are on these topics and that you wrote about it and really showed that. And so
Mhm.
definitely never a waste of time.
Yeah, and to your point about sharing work and just meeting really extraordinary people, like that's definitely been a highlight of, sharing stuff on Twitter, is that I've been very fortunate to meet like people basically who are a lot more experienced and more skilled than I am personally. And to be able to kind of get their viewpoints and takes on things has been very immensely helpful for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think there's been kind of a common theme with most people I talk to of like, don't be afraid to find your community. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of an introvert and you don't want to like put your world out there on social media and Twitter, that's okay. You can still ask questions on Stack Overflow or like respond to people's blogs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. You don't have to like post pictures and post updates. There's lots of
Yeah,
different ways to do it.
definitely.
So, very cool. Well, awesome. So I know you talked a lot about, you already mentioned kind of what your focus is on for this year and projects you're working on. In addition to that, are there any like other tools or softwares or frameworks that you've heard about that you want to learn more about, that like you're putting on the back burner or that you're curious about? I know a lot of people right now are talking about like learning more about Web3 and
Oh
decentralization.
yeah.
And there's like, so I was on maternity leave for a couple months and came back, and all of a sudden that was like the main buzzword I'm seeing
Yeah.
everywhere. So just curious, like if there's anything like that where you just kind of have it on your radar to learn more about at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's just this forever long list of things that you can learn in programming and development.
Right.
So yeah, right. So as much as possible, I do try to learn what I need to complete the task at hand. But I have heard, like, not just Web3, but have heard like a lot of people talking about Remix, which is a new open source React framework. I haven't quite dwelled a lot into it. It seems very similar to Next, like that's my current impression of it. And so for now, it's just like it's on the back burner. I know of it. And then in terms of Web3, I've definitely dived a little bit into it. I'm Web3 curious. Like there's still so much work in, Web2 that I'm not ready to make the shift into Web3, like, exactly.
Right.
But it definitely is interesting. And I'm just kind of withholding my opinions on like NFTs, for example, because I'm not quite sure how I feel about them. Like I feel like they definitely on one hand, there's a lot of potential for them and they help a lot of people like artists, whether visual artists or musicians and stuff, to get their work out there and it's actually to be able to monetize those. But at the same time, I'm thinking about the environmental impact of actually like what it costs to be able to mint a NFT as well. So
Right.
there's just like a lot of different things that goes on in the space, and a lot of people still think that it's really scammy and everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
just a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think it's like that with any new big craze or technology or idea or anything that comes out where a lot of people are really quick to, I guess I would say, jump on the bandwagon for lack of a better statement. But yeah, there's always going to be potential drawbacks and pros and cons. And so, I think it's important no matter what position you're in to just be considering both sides of that before like jumping into something. And so I think it's pretty safe to kind of say that you're staying on a neutral stance with some of the stuff and wait to see how some of it irons out. Cause I've seen some pretty heated debates on topics like that, which is always, it's all fun. And it's actually pretty educational for me to be reading about people debating and kind of sharing their opinions on both sides.
For sure. I think that's the case in just programming in general as well. Like if you start building a new application, it's like, which framework do I use? Do I use this? Do I use that? It's like everything has their pros and cons, right? It's just like what's the problem that you're trying to solve and which tool is best for that one.
Yeah.
So,
I
like,
know
I feel
people
like
love to post like, this is the right tech stack. And there is no right or wrong. It depends on what type of data you're working with, what's your project, like what's your end goal, your timeline. And it's kind of funny, but
when I was starting, I remember there was a lot of like hate on jQuery. But if you think about but if you think about it, like jQuery was specifically developed to solve the problem of like cross-browser functionality and everything. So I was like, it has its place.
right.
And it was still very, very popular until like a bit more recently, I suppose. So yeah.
Yeah, there's always going to be both sides.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking time on our podcast today. I know you're quite busy and really appreciate it. And I've loved following you on Twitter. If people are listening, is there like any other communities or places to find you or find your work or keep in touch? Or I can just kind of make sure that people have the link to your Twitter in the show notes.
Yeah, so definitely Twitter is probably the main place I share updates and everything. I am also on Polywork as well, which is a alternative to LinkedIn where I share updates of things that I'm doing. And I think Polywork is good because things don't get lost the same way that things get lost in Twitter over time.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
that's another one. And I would say that I write on Hashnode as well.
Okay. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes, and really appreciate you taking the time today. And thanks everyone for listening to Select Star. Stay tuned for some more awesome conversations.
Thanks, Margot.
Thanks for listening to Select Star, your resource for innovative technology and developer topics. You can find our episodes in all the usual places: Spotify, Apple, Google, RSS, and YouTube. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share. You can learn more about HarperDB at harperdb.io.